I get it. I'm 24 years in, right? Like, I know this is a heavy lift, and honestly, the Controlled Substance Act might have been the easy part because now what we have to do is redefine medicine. This is actually part of a global movement. This is not just in the United States, and it's not just about cannabis.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 128 of High Spirits. I'm Ben Larson, and with me, as always, is Anna Ray Grabstein. We're recording Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, and we've got another great episode for you today. We have Steph Scherer on from Americans for Safe Access, ASA, and we're going to talk about rescheduling, Schedule 6, if you've ever heard of it. Maybe you've heard of it. It's really great. Anyways, we're back from Miami. I'm still pretty tired. Slept 10 hours last night. I don't ever do that. Um, Anna Ray, are you recovered yet? Is it just me?
It's not just you. There's
Oh
been
my
a lot
God.
of travel and not only travel, but a lot of intellectual stimulation, lots of late nights in action. I am tired, but I'm finally back in my routine. I have like a really kind of every Monday I do a workout session with a personal trainer, and I'd missed it the past 2 weeks from a lot of different work travel, and it felt so good yesterday to just
Mhm.
go and be like, all right, I'm back in my regular Monday. I got this, and I'm gonna keep going. So um,
I
I'm I'm gonna kick this tired stuff. That's what I say, and I hope that for you too.
I love that. I thought I was there yesterday morning as well. I was at the gym at 5 in the morning. I was crushing my day, and then like the afternoon hit me, and I'm like, is this what jet lag feels like? I've never been one to have jet lag, but I am getting older, and maybe this is what it is. But hopefully, last night's sleep session knocked it out. But I'm a little loopy today, so apologies if I come out
Yeah.
of left field with something.
Well, I think it was worth it. I think we should share a little bit of our takeaways from what we were both doing in Miami last week because it is far to travel from California, but it was super useful to be there. It was a really great event. And I both learned a lot. I had great conversations. And I can't say that I'm incredibly optimistic, but I feel more clear about a path
Mm.
forward if there ever was one. How about you?
Yeah, yeah. For everyone listening, if you weren't aware, CanaBev Summit was in Miami last week. It's formerly known as CanadaCon, hosted by Delta Emerald Ventures. And last year, after CanadaCon, I talked to Ian Dominguez of Delta Emerald, and we both basically agreed that beverage needed to be the focus this year, and especially after November hit. Um, it being 3 months later, it seemed like it was a really critical point to bring together all the business leaders to just see where we were at with like hemp policy and where prospects were. And I think much of the industry is aware that the extension language that we're hoping to sneak into the farm bill um, has not really gained much traction. There's a hearing actually today. Is it today? Um, and yeah, I don't think the amendment got accepted. There'll probably be some discussion about it, but it really just brings home the point that if there is going to be an opportunity to have, in this case, hemp beverages maintain their position on store shelves, like there has to be some real significant progress. And uh, what was great was who was in the room. This really was truly the most powerful cannabis conference I have ever been a part of. There were business leaders from outside the industry truly invested, not just like in the room, navel gazing, trying to pick up information, but participating in the conversation. I think that's really powerful. We had major retail executives, major distributor executives participating on panels and telling us the way they feel it should happen or the way they anticipate it happening. And, at the end of the conference, in my closing remarks, I kind of equated to it's like, for the longest time, cannabis has been pushing itself into relevancy and begging for time on stage and waving our own banners. And um, it was quite significant to feel this moment where other people were trying to pull us into relevance and to fight alongside us. Although, and what they anticipate that looking like is pretty restrictive. I mean, very restrictive for what most of the hemp industry would like to see, but even restrictive for what the hemp beverage category would like to see. And so um, I think it's important for other people, not just in beverage, to kind of hear these conversations. And I'm really glad that you were there, actually, because like, you aren't officially, I mean, you're guilty by association, but you're not officially like a beverage executive, so to speak. So like, I'm really interested in what your takeaways were.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big takeaway that I saw is that hemp beverage seems to be pulling away from the rest of the hemp form factors with an understanding that if they want to continue to exist, that staying connected to hemp joints and hemp vapes and everything else that's in the hemp category is not serving them. And so to really create a separation, that was clear. Also, locking arms with BevAlc seems to be the strategy that the hemp beverage space has decided is the most practical or realistic path to not be eliminated after November. And what that looks like seems to be finding a place for hemp beverage within the three-tier alcohol system that's regulated at the federal level. Mostly at the federal level, what we're seeing is production and distribution, and then the states regulate retail. And it's not the same structure that the legal cannabis space has implemented, certainly, but it seems to be the path forward that hemp beverage is trying to take at this point. And within that context, there was a lot of historical reflection about what happened after prohibition and how after prohibition alcohol just wasn't 100% legal, but there was an incremental uh, progressive movement to first legalize 3.2% beer,
Mm-hmm.
and that over time the industry was able to open up larger potency alcohol products, and eventually now you see there's things like 151 on the shelf, but that wasn't immediate. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was huge. And then I moderated an investor panel, and I was going into that conversation very skeptical of like what is going on here with this massive regulatory uncertainty that investors could still be getting to a place of comfortability to write a check. And what what I heard ultimately is that investors are watching the extreme consumer signaling
Mm.
um, of their desire for this category, and that signal is creating confidence in investability in some types of companies, not all, but
Sure.
the consumer signal is still so strong, even though there is extreme kind of policy challenge ahead for the category. So
Yeah.
I paid a lot of attention to that as well, and I think it's interesting. I don't see as much money coming into the space during this uncertain time as we saw last year, but there is some optimism, and there was even some creative suggestions that Ian Dominguez suggested actually that someone had pitched him on, which was
Hmm.
basically like an a future investment commitment if some type of clarity legislatively occurs, meaning that founders and executives that have been in a growth phase of their business shouldn't sit on their laurels now. They can still be talking to investors who may be willing to commit kind of in the case
Mm-hmm.
um, of more clarity, so that as soon as that happened, the check would be able to be written, as opposed to waiting to start a process to be bringing in capital for growth once we know about November, which because it takes months to close deals.
Yeah.
And that way you're in it now, you're working on it, and you still have to wait, but there is some level of confidence if the industry is successful at finding a place for itself. So Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
like
my
that.
takeaway.
Yeah, the one last thing I would add is I just to be clear, I don't think either the hemp beverages or the alcohol companies have chosen this as the path, but all these organizations are investing a lot of money into being on the Hill and talking to legislature and or Congress and different regulatory bodies, and this is what it's coming down to. This is what we're being told, and oftentimes the phrase is like, "Well, would you like to have something or would you like to have nothing?" And they say that very confidently. And so, and even with that something, I hear a lot of people pushing back and like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And so, I think that's what we're pushing for. We're pushing for something in place of nothing.
Sure. Well, let's hit on two other short news updates, and then we should bring our guest on because we've
Hmm.
talked too long about this. But it is really interesting. Quick update: Virginia, a state that a lot of folks have been watching for a long time because they actually passed legalization legislation in 2021, but it just hasn't it hasn't become effectuated for a number of different reasons, but it seems like we're getting closer to adult use cannabis sales in Virginia. Uh, the Senate and the Assembly is reconciling legislation there uh, to launch adult use cannabis, along with resentencing past cannabis convictions and creating a pathway to allow medical cannabis use in hospitals. So, seems like Virginia is on the precipice of some major progress when it comes to this category.
Yeah.
And then New York, we spoke about this. Ben and I have been making regular appearances on Friday at the Cultivated Media This Week in Cannabis news update. We talked about this a little bit, but John Kajia has been appointed the new acting executive director of the Office of Cannabis Management in New York, which is the
Hmm.
regulatory agency overseeing cannabis in New York. And it is to great acclaim, honestly. I haven't seen the industry celebrate the appointment of a regulator in quite some time, but people are really hopeful that this is a good one. John has spent time uh, in the cannabis industry working on the data side for a
Hmm.
while, and then has been at the OCM and has been a strong advocate both for equity, for data, and kind of quantitative intelligence into the industry, and has been a great partner to lots of folks. So people are excited.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sitting a country away from John, and I know him as just a really invested and good-hearted man, right? And um, I also am excited about that, especially after seeing the DCC here in California appoint someone, and everyone immediately hitting Google's like, who is this person? Like, I've actually met John. Like, he showed up to cannabis industry events and represented and spoke, very eloquently about what they're trying to achieve in New York. So, yeah, John, congratulations, Godspeed, and congratulations to the New York market. It is great to have a partnership with regulators rather than this kind of us versus them that persists in a lot of markets.
Yeah. And John has an uphill battle in front of him. It is no simple task. And overseeing a market as big as New York right now, one of the biggest challenges that they're facing has been their track and trace rollout with Metric, uh, which they're the loudest voice in the room right now is a group of folks that are very upset about the way that this QR code called Retail ID has been rolled out, which forces licensees to pay 10 cents every time they print the QR code on the label. And they didn't have to do that a few months ago before track and trace was implemented. So people are pissed, and it's costing some people millions of dollars, which, of course, in 10-cent increments, that means that they're also making millions of products. That said, I would say that from my observation of the market nationwide, that this complaint from licensees is really a structural problem with the way that the Metric contract exists between the
Hmm.
state and the company Metric. Because in California, we also have Metric retail IDs, but they don't cost anything. Um,
Right.
for operators, and people actually really love them because it streamlines scanning at retail and COAs and all kinds of transparency. But it's because nobody's paying for them, but they are paying for them. They just don't see it. And the
Right.
difference is that the licensing fees in a state like California are very high, and that the state is actually paying for retail ID as part of its contract with Metric, whereas the licensing fees in New York are very low. And instead, there's all these add-on fees that come at in different kind of increments that the state is charging or Metric is charging. And it's psychological. I think in some ways that's my perspective. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
good old New York.
We don't need any more taxes, and this is a
I
form
know.
of a tax. So,
It feels like that for sure.
yeah,
Shall we queue up our guest? Okay,
let's
let's
do
do
it.
it. Our guest today is Steph Scherer, founder and executive director of Americans for Safe Access, a prolific medical cannabis patient advocacy organization. Since launching ASA in 2002, she has trained more than 100,000 advocates and helped shape legislation at every level of government, worked with the World Health Organization on cannabis's therapeutic recognition, and played a role in changing its status under international drug treaties. After years of advancing policy on a global stage, Steph returned in 2024 to lead ASA's second act, a nationwide push to fully integrate cannabis based medicines into the US healthcare system. And I personally have followed Steph's career and ASA's work since very early in my own cannabis journey. So, really excited to have her today. Welcome, Steph.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you as
nice
well.
to see you.
I'm trying to
We
not-
blabbed so long about hemp beverage at the beginning. I think we just couldn't help ourselves.
No, it's very interesting. Definitely to see, the players that are involved. I mean, when I first started Americans for Safe Access, I felt often like it was just me, a few people. I couldn't even get researchers to put their name on documents that they helped me write about medical cannabis. So, it's definitely a new world.
Well, and we'll get into all of it, but it does raise interesting conversations, especially on LinkedIn, about what is medical, what is access, what are patients, and where are they finding their cannabinoids. So we'll dive into all of that. But yeah, I would love to just kind of get the audience acquainted with you and your journey, because you have been at this for a number of years. ASA does have a storied past and like a very robust website. If anyone goes to it, you should go to it. Has about 64 pages on the blog, which is really impressive. But yeah, Steph, can just give us the quick lowdown on the journey of ASA and your involvement with it.
Yeah, no, and actually, I think a good place to start is why people say ASA instead of ASA for Americans for Safe Access. And that's because when I founded Americans for Safe Access, I thought I was starting a campaign against Asa Hutchinson. So we were ASA versus ASA, because Asa Hutchinson was leading a series of raids on the then handful of medical cannabis underground dispensaries. So I became a patient in my early 20s in San Diego. My neurologist brought cannabis up to me, actually. One day he came in and actually closed the door behind him and asked me if I smoke pot. And I said, no. And he said, do you know where to get some? And I just looked at him. I was like, am I your youngest patient? Because I thought he was trying to score weed from me. And he's like, no, it's not that. This was back in 2001, right? And so he's like, no,
Wow.
look, we're running out of options here. You obviously can't take these anti-inflammatories or you're going to lose your kidneys. You're about 6 months away from dialysis. And, if we can find something else, we should try it. And it's just a pretty scary thing to be told in your early 20s that that's around the corner. And the other option was to stop taking anti-inflammatories and be bedridden. So also not a good option. So I just called friends of mine that I thought might smoke pot and asked them for some. I think I started with friends of mine that listen to reggae. I know a little stereotypical, but he had some. And it worked. And then, of course, I annoyed him very quickly. I had to call his dealer myself. And I didn't have any like horrible experiences with dealers, but I had some embarrassing moments where, I was like in a suit in a Walgreens parking lot crying to this young, it was probably my age, but skater guy who wouldn't sell me weed because he thought I was a cop in a suit. So a friend of mine told me about some they didn't say underground, but some dispensaries in the Bay Area, California. And I went up and visited them, learned more about cannabis in like my little visit there, and left with like a 2-month supply and used a credit card. And, I thought it was legal. I mean, it felt legal. If you use your credit
Mhm.
card and something's branded for some reason, you're like, it must be legal. And returned back to San Diego and decided to move up to the Bay Area, not just for cannabis. I mean, it was good cannabis, but and then I got up there. 2 months later, there was a raid on Ed Rosenthal on his cultivation site in Oakland. And that's when I realized I was like, oh my God, these people are committing federal civil disobediences to provide a safe place for patients to get medicine. And while I hadn't ever been a cannabis advocate, so to speak, I had done some work in criminal justice issues and knew that, the main reason that the war on drugs was working was that 98% of people plead guilty because they've no other choice to. So it was just like a perpetual system that was, paid for by lobbyists for the prison industrial complex. So to see people willing to say like that law is wrong and we're going to break it, and we're going to do it openly, um, showed me that there was an opportunity to show people what those cannabis laws were doing. So that is sort of how ASA started. I went and kissed the rings of everybody in California, and thought I was starting what was going to be like a 2-year campaign. So,
Wow.
Well, and fast forward, it's almost 25 years later, and you're still at it. And in prepping to catch up with you today, you shared a recent post called the 12 Epiphanies that you posted that I looked at and really resonated a lot with me. And you guys can check them out on the Americans for Safe Access website. But a couple of these 12, it's a list of a bunch of epiphanies that you've had, Steph, I guess. And the first one is that a majority of people in cannabis are new, 5 to 8 years tops,
yeah.
and that in some ways in the cannabis industry, when someone is at 5 or 8 years, we're like, oh wow, you've been around for a while. Um, Say why this is so important and why this matters to the message and to what the work is that you're doing.
Yeah, so I, as you had mentioned in my intro, I had stepped down as executive director for a period of time because I was doing a lot of work internationally, and it just made sense for me to spend more time doing that because obviously we had to change the scheduling in the UN drug treaties to be able to advance medical cannabis here, and so I just really honed in on that work. But coming back into the U.S., um, what I found amongst the medical cannabis advocates I knew, they were just beat down, right? They felt like they had been pushed aside by adult use. I was trying to like get people rallied up. And, I felt like I was doing like divorce counseling. Like people felt like they had been, they'd been used, they'd been left. I was like, look, your husband is banging your 21 and older secretary. He's not coming back. No, it's not really, but but it was really, people were really because there's a lot of work. It was a lot of work to get us to this point, right? Um, but I also felt like nobody was talking about medical cannabis, right? And so, I actually had worked with HHS and FDA on the findings for the rescheduling petition. And when HHS came out and said there's accepted medical use of cannabis, that was something we've been working on for 20 years.
Hmm.
And the only news about it was about Biden, it being a political ploy of Biden, or that it was, businesses were going to get tax deductions. And nobody was talking about patients. And so it felt really demeaning, honestly, after like all the work that we had put in to make that moment in time happen. And so I felt myself feeling like I had to defend medical, like almost being like defensive about medical cannabis moving forward. And then what I realized, I kind of stepped back. The organizer in me came out. I started just like, people that were liking things I was posting. I reached out to them. I was like, hey, I noticed you like me. Do you want to talk? I just started meeting people right? More people involved, and realized that they had no idea that we were working towards a national medical cannabis program, right? They didn't know that for medical cannabis, the state programs that we created were triage to get patients off the battlefield of the war on drugs while we dealt with, items that DEA and HHS had brought up of why we couldn't have a national medical cannabis program, like creating product safety protocols for the supply chain and changing the scheduling of cannabis in the international drug treaties. So when I realized, like, oh, like, people aren't against me, they just haven't heard this, right? It's not like it's not like it's a bad idea. It's not like people decided they don't like medical cannabis. That really, a lot of people, especially on the business side, their first entree into this community might be MJ Biz. That, like, there aren't patient advocates in that conference. Like, the last time they invited me to speak there, Ralph Nader actually was the headliner and quoted me about product safety, and I never got invited back. But they have like the advocacy day, like the day before anyone gets there, and
Hmm.
so no one there is talking about a national medical cannabis program, so it makes sense. So for me, that's, as an organizer, if there's a problem I can fix, right, then I can keep going. I'm not a martyr, right? And if there's a consensus that the United States does not want medical cannabis, then I'm sure I could find something else to do. But that's not the case. Like, there's that support is there, and it just means rolling up your sleeve and doing old school organizing, talking to people, speaking on podcasts and speaking at events, and also, I started reaching out to a lot of event organizers, instead of being like, everybody hates medical cannabis, and just saying, hey, I noticed you haven't brought up patients in a long time. And every time people are like, oh yeah, do you want to talk about patients? Right? It's not, and again, it's just, um, and so I tell people about medical cannabis advocacy. If you just say the word patient in most cannabis rooms, people are like, oh, right, yeah. So that's what makes me hopeful, right? There's somewhere to go with that. It's not a consensus that we're done with medical.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really important conversation. Uh, we were at the Society for Cannabis Clinicians event in Colorado just a few months back, and there's so many passionate, knowledgeable folks like identifying this gap. And you mentioned when HHS came out under the Biden administration, like that moment, and here we are now under a Trump administration, still having a similar conversation. And then obviously we all know about the executive order that was at the end of last year, and I guess now we're all waiting. We're in this like waiting game. The FDA had a deadline of doing something. Of course, they didn't do it. Uh, has the conversation progressed since that moment? Like, are we closer? Are we actually anticipating seeing something? And is it actually going to be beneficial for patients? That's the big question. Everyone's pontificating on what they think Schedule 3 means, whether it's for removing the 280E tax implication or if it's actually going to create the medical program we all look for.
Yeah, I think that the key thing to what you said is waiting, and no one should be waiting. Like, that's the problem, right? Like medical cannabis didn't just happen. These laws never did happened, right? The difference, I think, of how we got here, was, the people that I worked with early on when I started Americans for Safe Access. We weren't just calling, the DEA denial for rescheduling a propaganda document. We actually read it, and it said that there's no product safety protocols for the supply chain. So instead of pontificating about when the federal government was going to do that, we partnered with the American Herbal Products Association and the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, and we created it. And that allowed us to create state programs, instead of pontificating or waiting for WHO to get around to doing the critical review that they were supposed to do. We wrote our own, actually, and used that to lobby the International Narcotics Control Board and got them to pass a resolution asking WHO to weigh in. And we organized the Committee on Narcotic Drugs at the UN to call on WHO for one. So I think that the challenge right now is that people think that policy is happening to them. And the only reason that is because they're not actually engaging. And engaging, by the way, is not a fight on social media,
Hmm.
right? There's a huge disconnect between what is being discussed in social media and what's actually happening in DC, right? And the same is true of what you guys were talking about before about what's going to happen with hemp. I think that the conversation here in DC about that is that it's closed. Like there was a
Hmm.
problem, they fixed it next, right?
Mm.
And the conversation around um, the executive order is that, Trump just told a lot of other people to do things, right? So it didn't. I mean, it should be an exciting time when a president mentions medical cannabis, obviously, and signs an executive order. But there's a lot of devil in the details there, right? The rescheduling component, he just told the attorney general to pick it back up
Hmm.
for making sure there's access to cannabinoid products. He told his staff to go work with Congress because the president actually cannot reschedule cannabis on his own.
Hmm.
And as far as and actually a lot of the third request came from a lot of our language, for HHS to look at a real world evidence approach to access for cannabis products. Can only move forward if there's funding in the HHS appropriations. So it's exciting, but I have to say what I'm most nervous about, and I guess I shouldn't be nervous that it might happen because it is happening, is that people think that it's completed, right? Just like you said, like people are waiting, and so it must be over.
Hmm.
And I think you remember this. I don't know, Ben, if you were around when Obama was first elected, but when his attorney general held I don't think he held a press conference. He was asked a question at a press conference about cannabis, and he said that he was going to stop the raids. He was going to stop the interference. From that moment, which was 2009, until 2014, we were unable to get Congress to do anything. So because they thought that the Obama administration had taken care of everything, right? That through his memos, they didn't need to introduce and pass the CJS amendment to stop the raids.
Hmm.
And so there were actually more raids by I don't know, like 100 times under Obama than the other two presidents. And we couldn't get anyone to listen to us. They're like, no, he took care of it. Right. And so what
Wow.
happened was with a lot of those raids, people were like, oh, well, they must be doing something wrong. I was like,
Yeah.
they're not doing anything more wrong than what these people were doing. Right. And I also think that's my fear, around Schedule 3, right? Because Schedule 3 doesn't do anything. Right.
Well,
Mm.
so to dive into that a little more,
Yeah. Go ahead.
and I'm with you. Schedule 3, I'm not really sure what it does so much. One thing that happened though in the executive order was also the directive to create access via Medicare for some CBD full spectrum medicines. And I'm wondering what you think about this because, I'm starting to actually see some progress happen. There's being discussion about what this program might look like, but it really is on the back of of kind of a hemp and CBD space as opposed to a true medical cannabis program. And I'm wondering if you think that this helps or hurts. Like, really, do we believe that this program is even going to move forward? It does seem to actually have some legs, but maybe within the context of that, if you could speak to that program specifically and also help us understand your vision for what a national medical cannabis program would look like.
Okay, so there's nothing in the executive order that actually talks about that program. It was actually something that Dr. Oz said at the event. There, in the proposed rulemaking for CMS for a certain program, there was a proposed rule that this is how all cannabis policy at the federal level works, but it said it didn't prohibit patients who are terminally ill from deducting products that were legal at the state level or the federal level from their healthcare costs. right? And so it was a proposed rule that is a very small amount of people. And so I was hoping that someone that I work with was actually in the room with Dr. Oz today, and he didn't mention it at all. But CMS is they're referring to it, but there's no mandate for them to do anything. It's not in the executive order, and what they could do, it has to be appropriated, right? I'll just say so. So it's a great talking
Meaning
point.
funded
And
is
sorry,
what that is. Meaning funded is when you
yes,
say
yeah,
that.
sorry.
Okay. Just so
Sorry,
people
I've been in DC like for a couple
Yeah.
months, so these dumb words like appropriate. But yes, so and we tried to get at the last minute in January, HHS's budget was part of the continuing resolution. And we tried to get an amendment added that would fund anything in HHS for the executive order, and it was a no-go. So the other challenge that I think a lot of people don't see, because why would you, from when you're not in DC, is that there's actually a huge backlash against cannabis that actually really the announcement of Schedule 3 and the sort of false narrative that it was a ploy by Biden to get reelected, that it somehow that it was cannabis was going to be rescheduled before the election. I think you guys all remember those fun rumors. That actually created an opportunity for organizations like SAM to make it a partisan issue again and really drive a wedge and organize and mobilize some of the last of the anti-cannabis people. And in election 2024, somehow all of those people got into leadership. So literally people who signed the letters against Attorney General Garland for asking for Schedule 3, and then just signed letters to Trump asking him not to reschedule, they're all in charge. So it doesn't matter if it's a majority, they decide what is on the floor. So that's frightening. And that's why the hemp revisions happened through the ag appropriations process, is because Harris, is very anti-cannabis, is the chair there. So but it's exciting because I think that you do have the head of CMS talking about this, right? This conversation, it's on people's radars, and that's really what we need, right? We really need for people to at least be asking the questions, and then we can explain why it doesn't work, so we can tell them how it will work, right? And so the National Medical Cannabis Program that we've been advocating for, it's evolved a little bit over the years, but it basically would create a Office of Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Control in HHS, not in FDA. And I just want to just if I get a minute, we'll talk about FDA, but we just need to keep cannabis out of FDA until it's a finished product. And maybe not even then, but they can look at the labels, but we don't want them regulating it. And it would create a new schedule for cannabis, a Schedule 6. So what's interesting is after we rescheduled cannabis at the UN level, the International Narcotics Control Board issued basically instructions on how member states, which that's UN speak for countries, that were signatories to the treaties, how they could stay in line with the treaties and still have a medical cannabis program. And it includes designating an agency for that program. And so all of I've worked in several countries and helping them get their national medical cannabis programs up and running. And when the conversation came up about the scheduling of cannabis, most places said, well, why do we care about it? I was like, we don't want people getting arrested. And they're like, yeah, we're not the United States. Like we don't have a drug war here like you guys. And so Schedule 6 is a very US specific need. But the reality is that cannabis doesn't fit into any of the schedules. It is a complex botanical medicine. And, it is if you just deschedule it, which I'll just tell you the political will for that is maybe a decade away in DC right now, unless people start getting more politically active. But the descheduling it also doesn't recognize its medical use. And so that is important because of the American Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act, right? Like until that is a medicine, people can kick us out of our homes for using our medicine. They can fire us. They can take our kids away. Um, they can take our cars away, our driver's license away. So, and society doesn't have to accommodate us. And so it's very important. So that's why, honestly, I felt like when it didn't matter to me what schedule HHS said, as long as it wasn't Schedule 1 and we had that phrase currently accepted medical use, that changed
Hmm.
everything, right? And in our strategic planning, which, honestly, we've been working off the same strategic plan for 24 years and it's been working. It's just things take a lot longer than a 25-year-old hopes. Um, but um, the recognition that cannabis has medical, I don't know how, if it impacted everyone this way, but I had people calling me crying. I was crying, like to be told that your medication, like the thing that is keeping you from being bedridden and actually living a life, that they recognize that it's medicine. I mean, like I wanted to call like every rude uncle of mine or whatever, but everyone that has treated you like a second class citizen. I mean, it's life changing, right? But from a
Hmm.
political side, it also should mean, okay, we have the consensus there. Then let's figure out how to get that to patients. And right now, there isn't a pathway at the FDA for a complex botanical medicine to be recognized and brought to market. And that's why we need the Office of Medical Cannabis. So,
So can I ask a quick just political strategy question?
of
Is
course.
and it kind of relates to when Obama made this declaration and then the raids increase, right? Does actually a win, so to speak, of getting it to Schedule 3, does that like neuter the the political will to then introduce a Schedule 6? Like, or like should we go from I've heard this conversation before in relation to descheduling. It's like, oh, if we give up and we give Schedule 3, then we're never going to get descheduling.
Yeah, I mean, I
Can
think
you?
that, I mean, it's so we don't have much control over what's going to happen in the DOJ. I'll just say that, right? Like
Fair.
what we have to hope, like honestly, what I was nervous about was the new DOJ kicking the findings back to HHS and saying that they couldn't use that approach to Camus or currently accepted medical use, right?
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter what we think, right? Like there's not I mean, you can try to influence DEA and every law enforcement agency in the United States. And so I don't see much, there's not much to do there, I think, as far as like, except for, I guess, like come up with new ways to insult people who support Schedule 3. But I think that what is important is for members of Congress to understand why it is not enough, right? And
Mm.
so, knowing how long these things take, if people get involved and actually call their members of Congress, and we make communication with your members of Congress so easy. We have like prepared letters for you. We even tell you when we have like a new memo. So I just wrote this long memo explaining to Congress like what happened during appropriations, what the executive order means. And so you can just download it and send it, or if you have a relationship. If you don't, you can just send add a little personal touch to a pre-written letter. And all you have to know is your address.
Mm.
If you don't know your address, I can't help you. But if you know your address, you can go into there
I know
and
I know a few people that applies to.
yes, no, I guess me too at some level. But I think though that um, I don't know. I mean, like it's up to us, right? Like
Hmm.
it's literally up to us. And for me, that's exciting, right? Because it means that this isn't happening to us. This is our society. This is our country. If it doesn't look like the country you thought it was, but the one thing I'll say is that members of Congress, their job isn't to come to DC and represent the laws of the state that they're from. Their job is to represent their constituents. And if you aren't talking to them, they've got lot of other people that are asking them, to look into other legislation. I mean, the job of a Congress person, I mean, it's just like one step up from a state legislator feel like the lower, like if you get down to the being a mayor or city council, you get closer to sewage. I always think like,
Mhm.
imagine how much they have to deal with, right? But it's a, they're thinking about a lot of things. So if you're not asking, there's literally no reason why they would. And so again, that's part of one of my epiphanies for optimism is that I know that you're not calling them, right? When I'm going in to talk to members of Congress, they're like, wow, stuff, that's amazing. I see what you're saying, but I'm not hearing about this, right? And so that is cue to me that it's time to organize. And, if people just for every conversation they had online about cannabis, right? Let's say for every 20 things you write about cannabis online, you actually talk to somebody like in the line at the grocery store, we might actually get somewhere. But
Mm.
and it's hard, it's hard, which is why we train so many people. That's part of why I've trained so many people is that it's not natural to talk to your members of Congress. Not everyone does it. And so I want to help you do that.
Steph, I want to talk about the tension between medical cannabis and the cannabis industry. And the cannabis industry has sort of evolved from first state level medical programs in almost every instance. I don't know if there's any state that just went straight to adult use.
Mhm.
And often the medical programs that states have implemented before they transition to adult use have been very restrictive and have created large obstacles for access and participation. Everything from just how someone might get a prescription or a recommendation to be able to participate in those programs to the form factors that can exist or who the players are that can create those products. So it certainly hasn't been perfect by any means. And then broadly, once states have transitioned to adult use, from my perspective, in some ways, it it could almost be construed as better for medical patients in so much as that there's much broader access. Now all you need is an ID. You don't need to jump through these like hoops to talk to a doctor or to maybe have a certain condition. Um, and so on that level, broader access is good for patients. And at the same time, dispensaries have not seen products that are very specifically created for medical patients have the same type of sell-through and success in the stores as products that are marketed more towards recreation. And I just want to face this head
Yeah,
on.
I
I
love
think
it. Thank you for, yeah.
yeah, I think that access is access in some ways. And
Mm.
that's why we have been so optimistic and hopeful for the way that we've seen hemp proliferate in retail, especially like the
Yeah.
products that, at least in my opinion or Ben's opinion, are safer. That it's been a great thing to be able to have people that want to access cannabinoids easily be able to grab them at a grocery store. Like what a
Yeah,
thing.
well,
What
in
what a
in
dream.
and just to like kind of capitalize on that, I've been engaging online, and there's been a lot of friction against fighting for hemp beverages in particular, because you now have people representing the hemp community being like, "Don't leave the patients behind," and I'm like, "Whoa!" Like I'm like living on two planes right now, where you have like medical and adult use cannabis fighting against like the proliferation of hemp because it's breaking the system or whatever, and then now you have hemp accusing hemp beverage of blocking access to patients because they're supportive of like pathways for a singular form factor. So not to throw too much at you, but
Yeah,
it's
I
just
love
become a
bring
very
it on, bring it
complicated
on.
conversation. and,
Yeah,
and
it's
and
like,
to your
what is
point, that
access, really?
Yeah,
yeah,
no, no,
exactly.
this is my breakfast conversation every day. So no, that's true.
Congratulations.
That's right, exactly. Those are great points. And I think that the way that I answer that is that while it may look like access is easier, that is true for some patients, absolutely. Um, but the reality of the adult use market for patients and for the products that they want is that let's face it, a intrastate approach to business, right, is not efficient. It's not effective, and especially if you're talking about standardizing a product for patients, right? Something I say to members of Congress all the time is, imagine if at the beginning of the pandemic, if Congress would have turned to Pfizer and asked them to create a vaccine for Rhode Island.
Oh,
There's no way they're doing it, right?
it's a
And
great,
so what
it's a great
actually
analogy.
what we actually see at the state level is that, again, these programs were meant to be triage. And I actually I don't want to get my medicine from those programs. Like most people don't. Most people want their cannabis, their medicines integrated into their healthcare, right? They want to be able to have it covered by insurance. They want it to be not something that necessarily is their identity. Just like, most patients don't think about themselves as being a patient unless there's a doctor in the room, right? That's a word that people use about us all the time. Like we're actually, that's not an identity component. Well, neither is using cannabis is part of your identity for most patients, right? It is a treatment that's working for them. And so in the States with adult use, what we've seen is actually the return of more stigma, right? Because there isn't a differentiation between someone using it medically and someone using it recreationally. And what I mean by stigma is like, I want to work here, but this is my medicine, right? If you're like, oh yeah, right. But we also, see higher taxes for those products, right? We see, and look, there's a lot of businesses that want to be medical, that's what they want to do. They want to serve patients, but there's a reality of being in that market, right? And they just want to pay payroll. And I get it. As someone who has to pay payroll, it is stressful. And so,
Mm.
of course, you're not going to say, no, I'm not going to serve more people. And so they get a dual license. And the reality is there's only so much shelf space. That's the reality. And
Mhm.
so, people, I feel like people avoid me, or they're like, oh, I stop carrying my medical products. But to me, that is a symptom of the fact that it's time to move on, right? And so, yes, someone might use, I think a lot of people, and this, I know pharma likes to say that this doesn't happen, but a lot of people try somebody else's medicine and then they go talk to their doctor about it. Let's be honest, right? I think, that is something we've seen in the adult use space. And the same thing with hemp. Like, yes, it is very exciting that patients had access to cannabinoid treatments. What was the challenge and really hard was what the hell was in those products, right? And as a patient advocate, I think the worst thing that can happen, well, not the worst thing, something I see commonly happen that I think is very bad, is when a new patient takes a product and has an adverse event that was either because the dosage was too high, the wrapper wasn't correct of what was in there, or there was a contaminant or adulterant. And yeah, they don't call a news conference. They just never use medical cannabis again.
Mm.
And so for someone who has a chronic disease, who, like myself, who cannot tolerate anti-inflammatories, do you know what it would mean to my life if my first experience with cannabis, right, would have been one that I got hives, which happened to me once from a gummy, or I like passed out, or I thought I was, the second time I took it, I got really intoxicated at work and got fired. Yeah, I'm never using cannabis again. So I don't think we need versus, right? Like, have adult use. I'm not
Mm.
judging you, right? I actually think that like we're moving on. So I think that what maybe the better conversation is, yes, this all comes from one plant. Yes, that is totally true. And when we look at product safety protocols along the supply chain, storage issues, all of those are going to be the same for this plant. Like how it gets to humans, right? All of that is going to be the same. But what is in those products, how it gets to people, is going to be totally different. And so, I actually think it's like what is that paper that's come out? The one plant strategy or whatever. I think what I most appreciated, they interviewed me and I was like, I don't agree with this context because I don't think descheduling is happening anytime soon. Right. But so through my conversations with them, they left medical out of there, right? Which is
Mm.
great. Like, yes, that is what should happen with adult use, right? And if you want to call them wellness products, but for things that are like insomnia is a medical condition. It's not a wellness issue. And if somebody needs to take a standardized medicine every night to sleep, right? There's ways that we can get that to people. And I get it. I'm 24 years in, right? Like I know this is a heavy lift. And honestly, the Controlled Substance Act might have been the easy part, because now what we have to do is redefine medicine. But this is actually part of a global movement. This is not just in the United States, and it's not just about cannabis, right? That, if you look at the medical conditions that are plaguing our country, right? 90% of our 4 trillion healthcare debt is based on chronic diseases and mental health issues. And for most of those chronic diseases, we don't know, not only do we not have a way to treat them, we actually don't know what they are, right? So
Mm.
having a pharmaceutical company develop a single target drug when they don't know what is causing ALS, when they don't know what is causing MS, they don't know, why someone has Crohn's disease, it's pretty challenging. And so a better approach would be actually looking at something that's working and figuring out how to safely get it to that person and study that as you go, which is what real world evidence medicine is based on.
Hmm.
Quickly, what do you think is working for medical cannabis patients in terms of form factors? What counts as appropriate within a medical context?
Whatever they need, and that what they need is accurately labeled. It has been tested for microbials, for heavy metals, and they can get it the next time they need it.
Hmm.
That's medical. Medical is that I don't want. I mean, you don't go to your
You don't want it
pharmacy
to
and
be a new strain. If
yeah,
one
be like, woo, want to try
suddenly
this
you
out
want
today?
Yeah.
Here, try these pills on your way to work. Like that. And so a scenario I often talk about is, no matter how well informed a doctor is or a medical professional is, the conversation that they're having with their patient about cannabis is out of touch, right? Because whatever they're learning, if they are learning anything, right, about cannabinoids, the patient isn't going to find that when they walk into a retail shop. They're going to encounter a bud tender who is probably pushing a high, like, it's like a bartender. Like, what do we have too much in stock? You get a bonus if you sell more of these. So a patient who like came in with a list, right, gets told by, someone at the store, oh, you don't know, she doesn't know what she's talking. The doctor doesn't know what they're talking about. You need this. And then they leave and have an adverse event. That's a loss for not just a customer, if you're looking at it business sense, that's a loss for the quality of life of that human. Right. And so I think that, I'm hearing, some people that are working on regulations trying to define medicine, and that's not up to regulators. The fact that what we have at the state level, it is compassionate use, which literally means better than nothing.
Hmm.
Right? There is no like, and the whole addition of the conditions or whatever, all of that was political, right? All of it, every minute of it was. And what we know is that didn't work at the state level for medical cannabis, and it can't work. It's not going to work that way at the federal level. And we know from, a few drugs, cannabinoid-based drugs that have made it through the FDA approval process, that single compound extractions are just they're not where it's at with cannabis, right? There's something else there. But the future of medicine is going to be about dealing with these chronic diseases that are not being treated with single target drugs. And there's not a pipeline of pharmaceuticals that are waiting to come in.
Yeah. Steph, we talk about business usually on this podcast, and I think but we also talk a lot about policy. And I think you've really added to the complexity and some breadth to help people understand how many more kind of perspectives there are at the table here. So really grateful for that. It is time for our last call. So this is your opportunity to leave a final message with our listeners, advice, call to action, closing the thoughts. What's your last call?
So last call means something else to a lot of people, but in this context, you know, I would say get involved and don't wait. If you're using the word, I'm waiting to see what happens with cannabis policy, you've already lost because it's happening right now. It's happening. There's not going to be necessarily a big bill with fireworks when we win. We're winning and losing every day, and
Mm.
that's happening because elected officials are educated on what we want going forward. And so, stop acting out of what you hope will happen or what maybe your business hopes will happen, and really look at what's happening, right? If you care about patients getting losing access because of the hemp bill, right, which is going to happen at the loopholes closing November 11th, then have your states pass laws to incentivize the regulated cannabis businesses to make it. Let's make sure we don't lose that access. And if you want elected officials that are going to come to DC and fight for medical cannabis, I encourage you to check out the Compassionate Candidate Campaign. We're asking people running for federal office to sign a pledge saying that when they get to DC, that they will introduce comprehensive medical cannabis legislation and fight for it. And we already have 2 pretty high-profile candidates that have signed on. I give you all the tools you need to do it, including like a draft letter, give you ways to say hi. No, just kidding. But I also say, keep educating yourself. And I want to thank both of you for creating this space for people to have this conversation and keep expanding sort of the possibilities. But just make sure that you're not pushing facts to prove your point, right? Or to prove where you want things to go, because it's happening. Like right now, every day, there are decisions that are queuing up what's going to happen to the future of medical cannabis. And as medical cannabis goes, so do the rest of these other markets. So thank you all. Get involved. I'll help
Get
you.
involved. Steph Scherer, Americans for Safe Access, thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. I feel like we could talk all day. I'm excited to kind of continue to follow what you're doing and support your work. So thank you. Thank you for everything you do. All right. What do you think, folks? Thank you so much for continuing to support us, for engaging. Special shout out to Shannon Howell from Oregon, patient and health advocate, and also Holly Lang, a medical cannabis consulting pharmacist out of Pennsylvania, commenting live as we go. We love the engagement. We love the likes, the shares, the reviews on Apple, iTunes, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you to our teams at Vertosa and Wolf Meyer. Obviously, the support that you guys give us allows us to do this every week. So thank you. And of course, our producer, Eric Rossetti. You're the best. All right, folks. I think that's it for this week. So as always, stay curious, stay informed. Most importantly, keep your spirits high. Until next time, that's the show.